Good morning, my friend.
Hey,
So
how are you?
life is wonderful.
Good.
So I recently noticed that I was watching a bunch of French detective movies series, and a couple of days later, I noticed that I had in the background my thoughts that French cadence of language, but I don't speak French, and it made me realize whatever you're consuming is feeding your subconscious, and it is really important. And I was curious, what do you do that feeds your growth and desire to be healthier and positive mindset, knowing that that's always occurring?
Yeah, so that's a great, and it's so true because you can only process and be aware at so much at a time, and the rest of it just goes into your subconscious, as you said, Jeff. And like for instance, last night I'm up here at my place. Last night, you can see on the side a huge TV. I could have sat here and did a mind melt and just watched something on TV, and I do that sometimes. But instead, I reflected on my day of skiing. I took notes on that. I knew I was going to be doing this today. I read a couple chapters in a couple books that I'm reading right now that are all about improving consciousness. This morning I had a surprise call. I was about an hour ago. Jim Defner, a dear friend of mine, leader in consciousness as well, called me. He was going for a walk and was thinking about me, and we had a 20-minute discussion, incredible, just full of energy and dynamics and all emergent thought. Right. So we pick and choose what we put inside of us. And I'm very intentional on that. I don't, it's funny because one of my daughters, loves to watch horror films. I have no interest. If they want to watch it, tell them, go to your own room. I don't want to see it. I don't have any interest in that. And we think, oh, it's not really going to bother you, but it does. The stuff that's recent. And so, when we talk about emergent process, that process, and as you know, we talk about lead from the future, act in the now, about 80% of the stuff that we have stored in here is not useful to take us to that emergent self, to that point where we can actually become the dominant force in our life. And so I do a lot on whittling it. And it may be not on just the input you're getting from the TV or from what you're listening to, but also from your relationships. If you're in toxic relationships, sometimes you have to minimize those. You have to put yourself in position where you're still cordial, but you don't go out of your way to spend time in those environments. Because I like to be around people like Jim is a great example. I mean, I was excited about doing this call, and that just added such value. We talked a little bit about what I was talking about today. He talked about, one of the things that he's doing right now. And just that synergy that occurs is explosive, because what it does is it opens up the prefrontal cortex, which is the creative area. It's the executive centers. It's the part where we collaborate. It's the area where we can create. And it takes us so far away from back in here, the limbic area, which is reactive. And in the baseline, as I was showing with culture and with society and with all the stuff going on in the world, it's important to know what's going on, but it's important to also realize in your sphere, what do you have control? It's kind of like the serenity prayer for alcoholics, right? You got to know what you can change and what you can't change, and have the wisdom to know the difference between the two. And so if you actually, and it's a discipline, because remember, our design 10,000 years ago, and as you know, all of my work, I go back to the way we started on this planet and where we are now, and it's a very different world. The physical threats that were so prevalent that required us to stay focused in that high alert, negative bias environment are no longer here. Now they're perceived threats. And because we're a global society now, if you take the input that's going on in Europe and Asia and the States and every city in the United States, and you let that consume you, you're going to be in a high reactive state, and this area isn't going to even work. And so you wonder why you're so anxious and so frustrated. So it's a process of literally removing the stuff that doesn't work and adding more of the stuff that does. Because remember, if your cup's already full, you can't add more to it. So it's about getting rid of about 80% of the stuff that doesn't work for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.